Our next guest argues that growth and productivity need to be front and center on the campaign trail in the 2024 presidential election, but he says politicians are anxious about the disruptions that frequently accompany growth. Let's welcome former White House Council of Economic Advisors Chair Glenn Hubbard. He is now Columbia University professor of economics and finance. His latest piece for the Wall Street Journal is titled Put Growth Back on the Political Agenda. And it's good to have you here.
Thanks.
And I've often rhetorically asked the question when I hear about when you do hear some people posit the miracle of the Biden economy, I said, what do you attribute, if it is a strong economy in terms of growth and unemployment, tell me where the pro-growth policies that you're talking about, where were there? I must have missed them because there haven't been any.
They're not there. We are potentially on the cusp of a growth miracle with productivity, largely because of AI. But you wouldn't know it in the presidential campaign on either side. And what President Biden has served up is basically a mix of protectionism and industrial policy. It's not pro-growth policy. The reason politicians do that, though, is growth requires disruption, and they don't have an answer for that. There are answers, they just don't have them.
When you hear a Republican talk about pro-growth policies, you think tax cuts or getting rid of a lot of over-regulation, which is certainly something you could argue we need at this point. But what else? What does pro-growth mean? We
need both those things, Joe, but we need two more things. One, to push the research frontier, we need much more public support for basic research, not industrial policy.
How are you going to cut taxes and provide more money for research?
Well, let me get there.
Okay.
The second thing we need is to address the disruption of people being left behind. There are a lot of very inexpensive things we can be doing in education and training and helping communities. We need to rationalize the spending we do in the economy on entitlements. We also need to be raising defense.
And you think that former President Trump, if he was in office, would actually deal with entitlements?
100% no.
100% no.
But you asked me what needed to be done.
Okay. Let me ask you a separate question, actually. And this goes to, as we're thinking about President Biden and former President Trump, the Federal Reserve. And there was this article that came out that said that one of the things that the former president would love to do if he got back in office is effectively end the independence of the Federal Reserve. I know there's some people who say that he doesn't want to do this as his advisors just sort of posturing. But there's no question that he is going to be, and he did it last time, out there maybe screaming and hollering about how the Federal Reserve needs to lower interest rates and what that will do to inflation. And I'm curious what you think about that. And on top of that, his efforts to put tariffs on China and what that will do to inflation. It's a very hard thing, I think, by the way, for President Biden, because President Biden is not the kind of guy who goes out and screams at the Federal Reserve, nor is he pushing for the same type of tariffs. So you can be very popular. You can be very popular doing what Trump is doing, but it also has its own implications.
Well, to be clear, the backdrop is I think inflation is stuck at a level above 2% if the Fed doesn't take further action. So the Fed is definitely on the hot seat. I don't think President Biden's completely innocent here. I think he's tried to job on the Fed, perhaps more quietly, and he's pursued his own protectionist policy.
There was an article, same article over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what former President Trump does or doesn't believe about the Fed, but I can say that compromising Fed independence is a decidedly bad idea at a time when the Fed's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that same weekend you saw the article that Biden people were quietly jawboning the Fed to.
They would love for the Fed to have lower rates too. You wouldn't hear.
Right, but how do you you think that Biden would let these Trump tax cuts expire, which would raise taxes on how many average people? Mostly average people with taxes would go up. But you think is that a pro-growth policy to extend those tax cuts?
Well, I think the tax cuts, if you take the CJA, Tax Cut and Jobs Act, together, it was very pro-growth, but mainly because of what happened on the business side. I don't think President Biden's proposals would raise taxes on everyone. He's concentrated mainly on higher income people.
Carve-outs then.
But mainly, that's about tax increases on business, a decidedly bad idea.
Why is that a good idea?
It's not.
And what about a capital gains Right. What about taxing unrealized income?
Well,
None of these things.
All of those are bad. I mean, capital gains not being taxed on realization means you'd be paying taxes on phantom
Do you
income.
think that when President Biden says that he wants to tax capital gains at the same rate as income, that he does that as a posturing measure for the public, and that's something that's never going to happen, or he does that because he genuinely wants it to happen?
I can't say whether he genuinely wants it to happen. I don't know, but I can predict it's not going to happen because we've traditionally had preferences under both parties.
We agree there.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go.
He knows whether he wants it to happen or not?
What did you say?
Nothing.
I won't touch that one.
Let me pivot if I could, because there was a headline that just came out about your university, Columbia. I don't know if you saw the news, but they have just canceled university-wide commencements. That's going to happen on May 15th. Individual school ceremonies will still happen. But I'm curious, as somebody who has spent so much of your career at Columbia, what you think of all that's happening and specifically about this decision.
Well, it's obviously a distressing situation on campus. There's an essential trade-off between free speech and academic freedom on the one hand, which are super important, and my ability to teach and learn not being compromised by your exercise of free speech. That is a fine line, and it's a struggle at Columbia and other universities. More distressing underneath that is the rampant anti-Semitism on campus.
Where do you think that comes from?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. It is a probing exercise in universities because you're not talking about traditional sources of anti-Semitism here.
Right. Do you see it, though, yourself?
I definitely see it myself. I see it in listening sessions with students in our community.